Okay. Let's do this. What section are we in now? Culture and history. Yay! History! The Chassin. The Chassin Wilders have lived in Kokori Wild since the First War with Mary drove them southward a millennium ago. According to their own lore, they'd always been a forest-dwelling people that adapted quickly to their new home. Game and fish are plentiful in the wetlands, and the Chassin thrived. For a time, they and the hill-dwelling outfiers were true threats to the northern lowlands. The Trevino Imperium had arrived and was hard-pressed to keep back the waves of invasion from the south and the west. Fortress of Ostegard was built, specifically to watch the Chassid hordes venturing north of the tree line. It was not until the legendary warrior Haftar sadly defeated the Chassid in the first half of the Divide Age that the question of their ability to contest the lowlands was settled perfectly. Today the Chassid was considered largely peaceful, though their ways are still primitive compared to our own. The Kokari Wilds they live in strange-looking huts built on stilts and even built into the great treetops. They paint their faces and are split into small tribes ruled by shamans like those amongst the Avars. There are many tales of these shamans having learned the magic from the witches of the wild, witches that inspired and as much terror as they did awe and gratitude. Either there is no definite proof they exist. In particular, the tale of Flebeth, the greatest witch of the wilds, is celebrated amongst the tribes. While there is no way to know how many there are in the wilds today, few travelers that pass the forest tell of Chassid. Eking out inexistent, even in the frozen wastelands of the far south. One can assume that should the Chassin even organize themselves once more, we might have reason to fear them here in Ferelden. We can ignore them at our peril. From Ferelden, Folklore and History by Sister Petrine, a country scholar. Oh, I don't know why reading these out is like bringing back my cold and like making me lose my voice a bit. Ferelden, History of Ferelden, Chapter 1. Ferelden, as we think of it now, did not exist before the Exiled Age. Instead, the valley was divided up into dozens of old Ameri clans. They warred constantly with one another over land, honor, and allegiance of the freeholders, and on one notable occasion, the name given to a favorite Marapre. And then, in the 33rd year of the Exiled Age, Cullen had Theron became Terran of Denmarim, and everything changed. Most of what we know about the founding of our nation comes from old songs that the bards passed down through the ages. Songs are filled with wild exaggerations and outright lies, but these hardly differs from scholarly papers and some of my contemporaries. There is no agreement among poets or scholars on how he did it, but Galahad gained the support of the Circle of Magi, and they crafted for him a suit of silvery white armor that, by all accounts, repelled both arrows and blade. Galahad left his armor across the valley. Led his army. He led his armor across the valley. He led his army across the valley and captured Ratcliffe, one of the only 3 men who ever successfully laid siege to the fortress, and presented himself to the bands of the Landsmeet as their king. Poets tell us that every lord knelt before Galahad, without question. The fact that he attended the Landsmeet surrounded by ash warriors and loyal mages of the Circle is generally omitted from the ballads, however. From Galahad came the line of Theron kings and queens who reigned uninterrupted until the 44th year of the Blood Stage, when the Legion invasion came. The rightful king was forced to flee Denrim. For 70 years a puppet sat upon the throne. From Ferelden, Folklore and History by Sister Petrine, Chantry Scholar. The occupation was a dark blot of Ferelden's history. History of Ferelden, Chapter 2. Our people who from time immemorial valued their freedom over all else were forced to bow to Legion rule. The Empire declared our elves property and sold them like cattle. Cavaliers routinely plundered freeholds of coin, food, and even women and children, and excused it as taxation. For 7 years no Landsmeet were held, and for the imperial throne had declared our ancient laws a form of treason. King Brendel was one of those who escaped. He tried to organize the other fugitive lords to retake the lands, and Brendel was neither clever nor persuasive, and the nobles preferred to take their chances alone. Ferelden might still be a little more than a territory of the emperor, were it not for the fact that his daughter had all the charisma that her royal father lacked. The rebel queen's rule began with a midnight attack on the imperial armory at Lothering. It was swift and successful, and with their pilfered arms, the rebels began a campaign against the Loresians in earnest. But the turning point of the war came when the young freeholder joined the queen's army. The lad, Logain MacTair, possessed a remarkable talent for strategy, and quickly became the favorite advisor of the young Prince Merrick. The queen finally died at the hands of the Letian sympathizers, anxious to curry favor with their painted masters, and Merrick took her place as the leader of the rebellion. Logain became Merrick's right hand. Merrick and Logain led the rebels in a new campaign against the Loresian oppressors, culminating in the Battle of the River Dane, where the last Chevaliers in Denerim were crushed. With the capital once more in the hands of Ferelden, the battle to free our people was finally over, but the battle to rebuild what had been lost had only just begun. From Ferelden Folklore and History by Sister Petrine, Chantry Scholar. Cultures of Ferelden. The Fereldens are a puzzle. As a people, they are one bad day away from reverting to barbarism. They repel invasions from Tavina during the height of Imperium with nothing but dogs and their own obscene disposition. They are the coarse, willful, dirty, disorganized people who somehow gave rise to our prophet, ushered in an era of enlightenment, and toppled the greatest empire in history. There are few things you can assume safely in dealing with these people. First, they value loyalty above all things, beyond wealth, beyond power, beyond reason. Second, although they have nothing in their entire country which you are likely to think at all remarkable, they are extremely proud of their accomplishments. Third, if you insult their dogs, they are likely to declare war. And finally, the surest sign that you have underestimated Ferelden is that you think you have come to understand them. Emperor Celine I of Orlais, in a letter to our newly appointed ambassador to Denerim. Dogs in Ferelden. I am frequently asked during my travels in other lands to explain the dogs omnipresent in Ferelden. Inevitably, I tell my foreign questioners that there are no more dogs in my homeland than in their own. In every civilized corner of Thranis, an astute observer will notice dogs employed in hunting game, keeping barns and storehouses free of vermin, herding livestock in storehouses. Sorry, I had to cough. Free of vermin, herding livestock, guarding homes, and even used a beast of burden in the mountains. It is simply the Fereldens show appreciation for the work that our dogs do. Perhaps the reason for that is tangled up in mythology. Hafter, the first man to be named Heron, the hero who united our Illyrian ancestors to drive back the dark spawn of the Second Blade, was reputed to be the son of a werewolf. Now, perhaps this was meant to be some comment on his temperament, or simply a way of making a great man even larger than life. More than half the noble families of Ferelden claim to be descendants of Hafter, and consequently many of our people believe that some distant kinship with wolves. It is only good manners to be polite to one's kin. From In Pursuit of Knowledge, the Travels of Chantry Scholar by Brother Gentavia. Which is weird, because this completely contrasts what was said in the wolves section. Geography of Ferelden. The Kingdom of Ferelden is the southernmost civilized nation of Thedas, although some scholars dispute the claim to civilization. It is perhaps the most physically isolated of all the kingdoms of Thedas. To the east is Amarthian Ocean, to the north the Waking Sea, and to the south the Corache Wilds, which in the summer months are a vast peapod, and in the winter become a treacherous labyrinth of iced over waterways. The Frostback Mountains guard the western borders, and only a narrow plain between the mountains and the sea allow travel between Ferelden and Orlais. Most of the land in central portions of the kingdom, called the Benorn, is open plains. These are crossed by remnants of an ancient Taviner highway that once connected Valbroyu with Oscar on the edge of Kureshu Wilds. The western part of Ferelden is dominated by Lake Galahad, the huge caldera filled by runoff of glaciers from nearby mountains. Lake Galahad is home to the famed fortress of Redcliffe, as well as the Circle Tower, which houses Ferelden's Circle of Magi. In the east, in the vast Brazilian forest, which superstitious locals profess to be haunted, and from which rises the Dragon's Peak, a solitary mountain that guards the capital city of Denerim. From the pursuit of knowledge, the travels of Chantry Scholar for Brother Gen Tivia. Oh my gosh, how many more of these? Yay, fun times. Castle Highever has stood since the Divine Age, when it was not an independent Banern, but merely an outpost of the growing Banern in the Merthenian, in the days before Merthenian becoming an Erling itself. The outpost of Highever was originally held by Alstane family, cousins of the house. In the Age of Towers, however, Ban Canabarastin was murdered by his wife's oops. Forgot to turn the sound off on my phone. My bad. I lost where I was. The outpost of Highever was originally held by Alstane family, cousins of the house. In the Age of Towers, however, Ben Canabarastin was murdered by his wife Flemeth, thus ending the bloodline. Canabar, captain of the guard, Siram Caslin, took the lands and title. Caslin declared their independence from Merthenian, starting a war that lasted 30 years. When the dust settled, Highever was on its own, in the possession of half the land that had once been southwestern Merthenian. Highever became a Terran during the Black Age, when Helia Caslin gathered the lords together under her banner to drive the werewolves out of their lands, earning herself the title of Terrana almost as an afterthought. Today, Highever is one of the only two remaining Terrans, making the Caslin family second in rank only to the king. The Caslin family, however, was all but wiped out in an unexpected attack by Jarl Hal of Merthenian, and the fate of the Terran is now in question. From Ferelden Folklore and History by Sister Petrine, History Scholar. That's my family, right, Caslin? So in other words, I'm actually in line for the throne? Ooh, okay, interesting. Like, I knew I was a noble, I didn't realize I was that much of a noble. Lothering. In ancient times, Lothering was little more than a training post that served the fortress of Osgard to the south. Nowadays, it is larger, serving Redcliffe and the community of the merchants and surface dwarves near Osmar. Its location on the North Road gives it strategic value. So control of Lothering has historically been a matter of contention between the southern Baron and the South Reach Erling. King Galahad himself stepped in and awarded the town to the South Reach in the Accelerated Age, which has largely ended the feud, or at least the appearance of it. From the pursuit of knowledge, I've read that so many times now. Noble families of Ferelden. The occupation left empty castles in its wake. Whole families were butchered in the initial invasion, and all those who couldn't or wouldn't bend the knee to Emperor's puppet king were declared traitors and hunted. Many bloodlines ended on Chevalier's blades at dusty crossroads, in forest clearings, or in freeholds. And then there were the turncoats. The curry favor with their new masters, some nobles took up arms against the brothers. They betrayed and murdered the rebel queen, an act that created even more vacant titles and lands, once King Merrick exacted justice. Ferelden did not fall apart for after the legions left. Is a testament to the strength of King Merrick. The old families still have held grudges against those who had sided with the Emperor, and those new families that had granted titles were viewed as interlopers. Now landsmeet that followed Merrick's coronation were tense, to say the least. From the Folklore and History, Sister Petrine Country Scholar. Cannot say scholar, apparently. Ostegard, representing the furthest point of encroachment by the ancient Taviner Imperium into the barbarian lands of the southeast. The fortress of Ostergard was once one of the most important defensive holdings south of the Waking Sea. It stood at the edge of Kuroshi Wilds, watching for any sign of invasion by barbarians known today as the Chassine Wilders. Straddling a narrow pass in the hills, the fortress needed to be bypassed to reach the fertile lowlands to the north, and proved to be exceedingly difficult for the Wilders to attack because of its naturally defensive position, which we can clearly see earlier on. Like most imperial holdings in the south, Ostagar was abandoned after Venar's collapse during the First Blade. It was successfully sacked by Chassine's Wilders, and then as the Chassine's threat dwindled following the creation of the modern Ferelden nation, fell to ruin completely. It has remained unmanned for 4 centuries, though most of the walls still stand, as does the tall Tower Ishal, named after the great Arshan, or as its constitution. Other than our constitution, construction. Ostagar remains a testament to the magical power of the Imperium that created it. The Grey Wardens. The First Blade had already raged for 90 years. The world was in chaos. A god had risen, twisted, and corrupted. The remaining gods of Tefinar were silent, withdrawn. What writing we have recovered from those times is filled with despair, for everyone believed, from the greatest Archons to the lowliest slaves, that the world was coming to an end. At Westhaupt fortress in the desolate Anderfiles, a meeting transpired. Soldiers of the Imperium, seasoned veterans who had known nothing their entire lifetimes except hopeless war, came together. When they left Westhaupt, they had renounced their oaths to the Imperium. They were soldiers no longer. They were the Grey Wardens. The Wardens began an aggressive campaign against the Blade, striking back against the Darkspawn, claiming land it was given up for lost. The Blight was far from over, but their victories brought notice, and soon they received aid from every nation in the Theatis. They grew in numbers as well as reputation. Finally, in the year 992 of the Tefinar Imperium, upon the Silent Plains, they met the Archdemon Dumont in the battle. A third of all the armies of northern Theatis were lost to the fighting, but Dumont fell, and Darkspawn fell back, got underground. Even that was not the end. Imperium once revered 7 gods: Dumont, Zazikal, Toth, Adora, Razikal, Usakan, and Nuthamil. 4 have risen as archdemons. The Grey Wardens have kept watch through the ages, well aware that peace is fleeting, and that their war continues until the last of the dragon gods is gone. From Ferelden, Folklore and History, by Sister Bertrine, Hatchery Scholar. Okay, so that pretty much promises 7 blights. And how many? 4? Only 4 of these are dead, so this is the 5th blight. This is 5th, so this one and 2 more are gonna happen, is what this is promising. Great. Crocari Wilds. It is seen that in the midst of the Black Age, when werewolves stalked the lands of Ferelden in numbers that kept every farmholder indoors, and a hound on every doorstep, powerful Ara of Almeria, people stood and declared that he would put an end to the threat. As Arling stood on the border of the Dark Forest, on the southern borders of Ferelden Valley, and he claimed that the werewolves used the forest to launch the midnight assault on humanity. 20 years as Ara led an army of warriors and hounds deep into the forest. In his hunt for the werewolves, he slew not only every wolf he came upon, but also every member of the Chassine Wilder folk. Any one of them, he said, could harbor a demon inside, and thus be a werewolf in disguise. For 20 years the forest rang with screams and the rivers ran red. The tales say that an old Chassine woman found her sons all dead at the Arl's blade. She pulled one of those very blades from one son's heart and plunged it into her own chest, cursing the Arl's name as she did so. When her blood touched the ground, a mist began to rise. It spread and spread until it was everywhere in the forest. Arl's army became lost, and it is said that they died there. Others say they wander still. The ruins of his Arling stand to this day, filled with ghosts of women waiting eternally for their husbands to return. The forest of the legend is, of course, the Kuroshi Wilds. There are as many legends about the great southern forest as there are shadows. Or so the saying goes. I'm sorry if you guys can hear the work tools outside. I have no idea what that is, and it was completely unexpected. and there's nothing I can do about it. Or so the saying goes. The Chadsey and wilder folk have made their home there since mankind first came to the lands, and the wild lands spread as far into the south as anyone has ventured. Beyond the mist are vast tracts of snow, white-capped mountains, and entire fields of ice. It is a land too cold for mankind to survive, yet Chadsey eke out an existence even there, and they tell of horrors beyond the wilds that lowland folk cannot begin to comprehend. To most, the Ferelden simply ends with the Corcary wilds. There is nothing beyond. The wilds is a land of great trees, wet marshes, and dangerous monsters. What more need to be said? From the Land of the Wilders, by Mother Alias, Chantry Scholar, 918, Dragon. Darkspawn. The whole reason for all of this. For those who had sought to claim heaven by violence destroyed it. What was golden and pure turned black. Those who had once been mage lords, the brightest of their age, were no longer men, but monsters. Thordorius 12:1. Sin was the midwife that ushered the Darkspawn into this world. The Magisters fell from the Golden City, and their fate encompassed all our worlds, for they were not alone. No one knew where the Darkspawn came from. A dark mercury of men in the darkest places that thrive, growing in numbers as a plague locusts will. In raids they will often take captives, dragging their victims alive into the deep roads, but most evidence suggests that these are eaten. Like spiders, it seems Darkspawn prefer their food still breathing. Ooh, that's a creepy thought. Perhaps they are simply spawned by the darkness. Certainly we know that evil has no trouble perpetrating itself. The last blight was in the Age of Towers, striking once again at the heart of Trevenier, spreading south into Orlais and east into the free marshes. The plague spread as far as Ferelden, but the withering and twisting of the land stopped well beyond our borders. Here, Darkspawn have never been more than the stuff of legends. In the northern lands, however, particularly Trevenier and the Anderfells, they say Darkspawn haunt their hinterlands, preying out on outlying farmers and isolated villagers. A constant threat. From Ferelden to Folklore and History by Sister Petrine, Chantry Scholar.